Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Quake 2 Nightmare walkthrough. No BFG, no healing drink of truth, whose name I do not know, as we move through another section of the game, taking on these grenading enemies. This guy is known as a gunner, I believe. I think he has the ability to fire grenades. He also has the hit scan, so be careful of that. Guy is an absolute magician, but we have the super shotgun now, and the super shotgun is so good. You could probably make an argument that it's too good, but there is nothing wrong with it being too good for us, right? Gives us that extra advantage against this incredibly cranked AI, and we're going to use it as best as we can. In the previous video, I was talking about the idea of choosing the easy path instead of the hard path. And it came from the perspective of fighting games. If you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, Street Fighter 6 has a modern control scheme, and it enables to simplify the controls to the point of absurdity, so that the lesser skilled and lesser learned player can compete with the more skilled and the more learned player, and it leads to a lot of controversial moments. If you want to get the full skinny on this conversation, feel free to check the previous video. But we were talking quite feverishly about the idea of making things easier instead of learning to do them. And kind of the pitfalls of that in society, and the pitfalls of that philosophically as a mentality, because you don't really develop in that, you just make everything else easier. And there's a really good stand-up comedy bit by George Carlin talking about how when the grades were going down in America, they made the tests easier, and this is not just an American thing, it happens all over the world, sadly. But he joked that at one point, all you'll need to get into college is a fucking pencil. And he's not wrong. As tragic as that poignant observation is. But you see it in all kinds of things. And it comes at a huge cost of developmental skills and happenstance. Because we all know, guys, whenever you put yourself into an awkward position, a difficult place, you tend to grow. You tend to grow by virtue of having to develop to survive. And everything you do in life is this wonderful kind of catalyst that bubbles into different spaces, and these different spaces aren't even the intended direction you thought you'd take, but they're the one that you find yourself in. And when you find yourself in these interesting places, that's where the true learning happens. There's a strange kind of double standard to wanting to be better, because I think everybody at some point wants to be better. But what if being better comes at the cost of things being made easier? Are you really getting better at that point? Or are they just lowering the bar? And the dangers of lowering a bar are, I think, quite obvious. When you lower it to the point where mediocrity is excellence, there's nowhere else to go. And at that point you kind of dig yourself a hole that'll be very difficult to get out of. And it's a terrifying idea, isn't it? Because there's a movie called Idiocracy. And in that movie, it's the idea of, what if that one lazy guy that doesn't want to do anything and wants to get away with murder while everybody else does the work, what if everybody turned into that guy? What if the world was allowed to get to the point where everybody is so incapable that we have to make an incredibly incapable world in order to placate the masses? And it leads to this kind of rather scary but also very silly dystopian future. This is a new enemy as well, guys. This is a beefy boy. This thing is called the Gladiator. It has a railgun. If you strafe left and right when you're attacking that creature, you tend not to get hit by it, but its accuracy is mighty and the damage it takes off is really high. Be very careful when you take on that monster. Save before they turn up, obliterate them, get on with the game. And be careful of the lifts. The lifts in this game are weird. They really troll me all the time. I think there was a collision error there which made it go back up really quickly because the body was underneath it. A weird level, this one, but quite ambitious with some of the stuff you're doing in it. We've also got the chain gun, which is very good. Incredibly powerful weapon. I'm a big fan. I will be using it a lot whenever I need to get some shit done. But the idea of Making things easier rather than making the educational tools better is probably something that I would imagine school teachers fight against daily. Especially if you really respect something. If you really love something, the last thing you want is to watch it get destroyed with the slow creep of just madness, really. Because it is maddening, I think. It's both maddening for the people that don't understand why it's happening, and it's madness for the people willing to accept it. And I find it a fascinating topic to talk about, hence why I'm talking about it here. I could have just responded to that comment and then got on with my day, but I have a lot of talking to do today, so it gives me something to wax about, and it is a fascinating conversation. Because I can see arguments for both sides. And when you can see arguments for both sides, I think it always makes whatever the point is being discussed more interesting. Because if you can empathise with the antagonistic position, that's where real discourse can live. This is a tank, by the way. This enemy is incredibly beefy. There are a few things you can do to him if you know how to exploit his hitboxes. Sometimes his hits hit you, and sometimes they don't. And there's these weird tells on when that's going to happen. You'll see me manipulate him a little bit in this footage. Just do as much damage as you can, and make sure you're not in the way of any of his moves, because he kills you almost as quick as anything else. Very fast deaths will be at the hands of that creature. And watch out for the gladiator, because he hits like a truck, as he just did then. Very fast as well. But think about if you took that concept, right, guys? Learn a fighting game, learn the execution, then get to the really interesting stuff. Like, translate that into another area of culture. Imagine that you are a language student. A lot of you listening to this speak multiple languages. You are already above average on that. Lots of people speak one language. I speak one language, you know? I'm the lazy imperialist that was lucky that his country conquered most of the fucking planet and said, "Oi, dickhead, this is our flag, we stuck it in your land, speak our language." And rather generously, it has been allowed to continue after our reign, and now English is a very popular language. You could say, and there are arguments to be said, that speaking English is one of the biggest, most advantageous things you can do when it comes to communication. Because it is the language that rules the world. Are there better languages? Probably. Are there harder languages? Definitely. There are hundreds of languages, but for some reason, this is the one that was chosen. So I got lucky, some of you guys got a little bit less lucky, unless you really like English, and then that's awesome. Now imagine you're at a crossroads, and you're choosing a language to study in order to get really good at a language, and to use it, and to, you know, have an enriched experience with it. Do you choose English and have the capacity to engage with 99% of the planet, in almost any country where you go, in almost any nation, any culture? Like, of course, there's going to be exceptions, but you could argue, and I think you would agree, that if you learn English, you are learning the best tool when it comes to communicating with another human being. Of course, depending on where you live, it might be Mandarin, it might be Spanish. You know, there are a lot of languages that are spoken everywhere. Lots and lots and lots. I appreciate this, guys. Don't crucify me. But I think we can agree, right? Learning English, probably the smartest choice. If there was a stereotype of pushy parents, they would want you to learn English instead of becoming a doctor or a lawyer or whatever the stereotype is in your family. Now imagine, instead of choosing English, you pick Mesopotamian. And you might be thinking, why would you do that? Or you might be thinking, that sounds cool as fuck. Mesopotamia, awesome. I love that stuff. Because that's the interesting thing, isn't it? If you were to learn Mesopotamian, because it's quite a rare language, you would probably be able to get a cool job doing cool things, hopefully, and go on all kinds of research grants and doing Mesopotamian shit that people get up to that I know nothing about, which I hope is very cool, because it should be, because it sounds awesome. I don't really know what doors that opens. Maybe it's really cool ones. Maybe it's zero. Maybe it's like my degree, written in crayon on the back of a fucking Snickers wrapper. Zero doors open, you know? But I think we can agree, if you learn Mesopotamian, your choices completely are just absolutely devastated compared to learning English. And this is looking at it from like an objective stance here, guys. I don't care if you hate English. I don't care if you've never used it once, if you think it's a dumb language. It doesn't bother me one bit. That to me sounds like a strange choice, unless you're a baller and languages are your thing. You know, some people just learn languages, that's what they do for most of their life. And there's nothing wrong with it in my eyes, I think that sounds amazing. But that's what this modern controls is. When you put it in a different context. Of course, it's a ridiculous context and it's an extreme context, but they're the most fun to talk about. And you can look at it in many ways, you know. Can you imagine if you want to be the greatest golf player in the world? You want to win the PGA Tour, you want to get all the sponsors, you want to make Tiger Woods look like he's garbage. Do you practice on putt-putt golf, as you guys call it? We call it crazy golf, to give you an idea of how much it's respected as a sport. Do you practice on the dinky courses with the fucking obstacles and the hazards and the windmills? Because you might dick around and you might be pretty good, because I would imagine if you practice on those you might get quite technical with the club, because you're still using the club and you're still using the balls. So hell, maybe there's something to be said about being really, really good at, you know, micro adjustments with the ball. But when you play golf, it's not just about micro adjustments with the ball, is it? That's only really the putting and some of the more select shots when you need to get onto the green and whatnot. When you're at the start of that range, on that hole, you have to drive. You have to hit that thing real fucking hard, all the way down the thoroughfare or whatever they call it. And then from there you make those adjustments so that you can get in, you know, under par and hopefully get that birdie or that albatross if you're a god. But I hope you can see the contrast there, right? It's very difficult to practice being like a rally car driver if you practice in a dodgem. And this is the real crutch of it, what I don't like. And this is the thing, when we bring it back to it, when we get away from the big examples and the silliness. When you learn something that is so multifaceted, so interesting, so detailed, so in-depth, and so unbelievably overwhelming, there is nowhere to go but up. It's true. You start in the gutter. You're in the bilge, you know? You're just dragging the silt up with you. And everything is difficult and everything is too much. But eventually, things start to slot into place as you develop, as you understand. This is an Icarus, by the way. This is another new enemy. We've not seen too many of these guys. These guys fly around. They generally come in pairs, or at least multiples. This one just seems to be maybe one. Watch out for him, though. He is a little bit of a crafty enemy. And he does have a big collision box on him, so when he flies near you, he might try and body block you. And then we have the medic. Dude, this is the worst enemy in the game. This creature can revive other monsters, so you need to have zero tolerance for this guy's bullshit. Make sure you punish him as much as you can, and hopefully he just like runs around in his weird AI loop there, instead of rezzing anybody. And if no one's dead, he can't res anybody, so maybe that's why he was doing it, but always get rid of that monster. Incredibly dangerous, and if he starts bringing back the big things, it's going to end badly. But you learn something the right way, and you open up everything else. And it's just like first-person shooters. I get comments on my videos sometimes talking about mouse and keyboard because it's really, really difficult. If you're good on mouse and keyboard, you tend not to remember what it was like to be bad, because it's something that you've done a lot, you don't even see it anymore, you just react instinctively. And everybody's had a PC in their house now since they were kids. You know, it's not like when I grew up where they didn't even fucking exist unless you were NASA. You know, it's... access to PCs is easier. Access to games is easier. Everybody can use mouse and keyboard. Everybody thinks they're good. That's awesome. There's a huge difference between thinking you're good on mouse and keyboard and being good. And when people see someone who is good, they tend to go, oh wow, your aim looks really good. What did you do, you know, to get it in that game or whatever it was? You know, I'm struggling with this. Is there anything you can give me as far as advice goes? And then you can start asking them the really interesting questions and the in-depth questions that you need. Questions you've heard me talk about numerous times and I'll talk about again. When people ask me about mouse, I always ask them the same things. Are you using a good mouse? Are you using a good mousepad? Are you using a good monitor? Do you have good frames? Do you have VSync turned off? You know, what's your DPI? Do you know what that means? There are so many questions that can help people have a better experience. And so many things that you can adjust, and so many settings. And the pitfall there is that a lot of players will look at what your settings are and then they'll copy them as if they're their own. But settings are so personal, you need to develop them for yourselves. And the best thing you can do when it comes to mouse and keyboard is the same thing when it comes to fighting games. Just play. Play the game you want to get better at. Play it, get bodied, suck, be trash, get better. That is the answer nobody wants to hear. Because it takes time, and because it takes effort, and because you have to engage yourself. And it's so easy to engage yourself for a week, and then wander off and do a million other things, and then completely lose the luster and lose the drive. Discipline is difficult, wandering off is easy. Just look at Towley. And herein lies the problem with it, you know? In a fighting game, you can do the hard path, and that hard path leads to you being able to play any fighting game that exists on a fundamental level. I'm not saying you're going to know the systems, I'm not saying you're going to beat everybody, I am telling you that you will understand the concept of neutral. You will understand the concept of anti-airs. You will understand the concept of hit confirming, of linking, of cancelling, of conventional combos and punishers, and perhaps footsies. And then you might learn all the more technical stuff, getting into the mind games, getting into the conditioning. That's what fighting games are. And they're incredibly in-depth, and they're incredibly difficult, and they're incredibly rewarding because they're so hard. You know when you hear people talk about Souls bosses, why do you think it is that they tell you that it feels so satisfying to win? It's because the boss didn't lay down for them. That's all it is. Most bosses nowadays, they're paid actors. You walk into the room, there's a fancy cutscene, you shoot them 3 times, they lay on their fucking back, they close their eyes, you wander off, they get up, they take the paycheck. It's trash. Games are easy. They're made by people that don't understand what made games challenging, so when they are difficult, they're generally unfair or badly designed. And then every so often you get this really rare moment where the planets align and you get a legitimately challenging video game that's well designed. The reason people love those Souls games is because it doesn't just give it them for free, and when they finally win, and it takes time that they had to put in because there was no shortcut, they feel something at the end. And we are a consumer base that have forgotten what it feels like to appreciate the toil, to appreciate the suffering, appreciate the struggle. Instead, it's just instant gratification. It's win by entitlement, not by achievement. And even the achievements now are fucking cheated and everybody's loading save files because it's just gone to hell, basically. And that's why that question remains. Do you want to learn one fighting game? One fighting game. None of the other games have that control scheme. None of them. Not even close. And then the next Street Fighter comes out, there's no guarantee they're going to have that control scheme. You're learning a control scheme to play one Street Fighter that's not going to last forever. And who knows? It's looked at quite popular right now. People think of it fondly now, but in a couple of years, who knows? Maybe it'll be hated. Maybe it'll be the Street Fighter no one goes back to. Maybe it'll be the Dark Souls 2. You can never tell how it's going to go. Most people, if I broke this down to them, and I explained it in a way that they could understand, I believe would agree, learning the tools to take on any fighting game is a more lucrative decision than learning one fighting game on a very basic entry level. There is no contrast there between somebody who wants to better themselves and somebody that just wants to immediately start thinking that they're winning when they're not. And there's a member of my community recently who said that he wants to get better at Street Fighter. And he said he wants to get to this rank, and once he gets to that rank, he'll be happy. And there's a lot of people that think like that, guys. If I can get to X rank, I'll have made this arbitrary guideline in my brain, and I'll have crossed the finish line, and I'll have achieved this thing that I've set up for myself, that sadly, because I don't understand what I'm talking about, the goal I have set doesn't mean anything. And we all do that. It's just the most human thing, isn't it? Set a goal when you don't know anything, and then you learn about the game and you realise how silly your goal was. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have goals, of course, because goals are super important. You don't have to be Jordan Peterson to appreciate a good goal. And you might be thinking, well, what is wrong with that goal? What's wrong with saying I want to get to B, and then C, and then D, and then I'm good? Well, it's a difficult conversation, and it's a difficult question to answer. But fundamentally, it really is like anything else. When I was first going to college, when I was leaving school, this is a difficult room, by the way, here, guys. There's a gunner, there's a tank, and then there's, I think this might be even a berserker coming in here. Oh no, it's just the gunner. So just be careful, there's lots of bad things here. Use the geometry to your advantage, use your grenades. When I was first leaving school, I didn't know what to do. Because I didn't know where the path led. And I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to achieve it. And in those days, it was quite a little bit more difficult than it is now to follow the direction I was looking at. I wanted to do art because I've always done art. I see myself as an artist. But I didn't want to do the type of art that school pushed on me because it wasn't the stuff I enjoyed. I'm not a painter, guys. I don't do massive portraits, you know? It's not who I am. I don't do texture. You know, I'm not a textiles person. I'm not a print guy, really, in many ways. The whole printing process, even though I went to a printing facility and was shown how to do it with the machines, and it looks awesome, and I appreciate what people can do with it. It's not who I am. I don't do ceramics. I actually have naturally very warm hands, so clay is my enemy because I dry it out too quickly, so it becomes very difficult. And the teacher was like, what are you doing? How have you done this? I'm like, I don't know. I did what you showed me. And then she's like, oh, okay. And it was just a moisture issue. You know, like, there's just certain things that you might be good at, you might not be good at, and there's nothing wrong with going, this is not for me, you know? I will never get a master's degree in mathematics because my brain is more creatively minded than the logic side of the mathematics, which is one of the reasons why I was good at telling stories. I was good at, you know, coming up with creative ideas, but when it comes to advanced mathematics, I start to struggle because my brain just doesn't look at the world like that. And I'm okay with that. My maths is good enough to get me through life. I don't do any job that requires anything too crazy. You know, I'm not an architect. I'm not a physicist. I don't need any of the really, really advanced stuff. I get by okay. I'm not going to ask for the tests for mathematics to get easy because my brain can't get it. And I've tried to look in there and better myself and learn and improve my abilities. Maths is just something that fundamentally I don't enjoy. And when I don't enjoy something, I'm not going to put the time in to improve. I'm going to use what I've got, I'm going to be grateful that I learnt it, and I'm going to go, damn, those maths guys are so fucking cool. I'm so jealous that they're so good at that, they put that time in, look at that reward. That's what they earned. I'm not going to demand them to make the test easier so that I can get the same fucking degree and wear the bloody cap, because it's stupid. And it's unnecessary. But when I was going to college, I wanted to do stuff in the lines of anime and manga because I really, really liked that stuff at that point. And I'd drawn my own mangas, I'd done like fan fiction mangas of artwork that I really liked, I'd done a whole host of different things. I was into character designing, I really liked that stuff. But when I went through some of the colleges, there was no courses that seemed to resonate with what I was trying to do, because they covered such a wide spectrum, you know. And then what happened is you took your first year, and then your second year you specialised. And when I got to the second year in the specialisation, it got way better because I could focus more on what I like to do, because I'm a detail guy. I've got an illustration background. I like to do fine and high detailers on like a large scale. But of course, to tick the boxes when you go to college, you've got to do a million different things that you don't really want to do. You have to engage with mediums that might not be for you. And it's a really good idea to do that, even if you don't like it, because then you get to learn these really useful tools. And what tends to happen is when you're younger, the things that you don't see value in, as you get older, you see the value for it and you go, damn, why was I so stupid? Why didn't I realize at the time that this was going to help me? You know, instead of being that kid that goes, oh, I'm never going to use this, fuck this, I'm not going to listen. If you'd have took the time to listen a bit, you would have got these skills, and who knows when you're going to use them, because life is wonderful like that. Every so often you've got this odd moment where you kind of go, I know how to do this. I learnt this a long time ago and it's still with me. This is so valuable. And of course there's many opportunities where that just doesn't happen and it's sad. But there's no such thing as like bad knowledge to learn if it's true, if it's verifiable. Like, I don't want you learning about fucking angels and flat earth and all that shit, but there's a lot of skills that you can get that will help you with reality. And even if you don't see the merit in them then, maybe later on you will. And deciding what is meaningful again is always the most difficult part, but the most meaningful part too. And that's what gives it value. But when I was going to college and I wanted to do this very specific type of art, I didn't have that option, I didn't have that goal. They didn't offer it. And my lecturers at the time were actually really anti-anime and anti-manga and anything that looked like that. They were anti like Japanese animation stuff. And what I learned later on is there was a person in the group and who took the course I took the year before who had been really difficult. And that person had been obsessed with manga. Everything that they did, no matter what it was, they twisted their artwork to reflect it. And of course, nowadays, maybe they'll be really tolerant of this and they'll encourage it and it'll be awesome and that person would have had a great time. But when I was going, that's just not how it worked. So what happened is she clashed with the lecturer. They clashed in general when it came to the course. She wouldn't listen, did her own thing, and gave that kind of art style a really bad reputation at that school. So young kid Chris turns up and he's like, I want to draw cartoons. You know, I want to draw like cool characters and shit. I want to do fine art. And the lecturer was like, yeah, we don't do that. Yeah, that's not here, mate. You don't do that here. And it kind of broke my heart and really demoralized me. And when you look back at it, it's like, what a terrible fucking teacher, what a terrible situation, what a terrible course. There's so many failings right there. It's profound, you know. But back in those days, it was just like, yeah, he's a shit sandwich, now fucking eat it, smile and thank me. And that's kind of what you did. And because I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do, I was like, okay, I guess I'll just commit to this. I'll refine my art. I'll learn what they want to teach me. I'll do all this stuff that's not for me, that's not part of what my specialty is. And then who knows, maybe later on it'll make a bit more sense. And I did that first year. I didn't really like it. I met some really cool people. And then at the end of it, we got to specialise, and I specialised in fine art, because in my mind, fine art means detail. It means, you know, really get into the bones of what you want to do. And I didn't know what fine art meant to those people that had structured that course. So when I went into the room that first day, they gave me this sheet of this like, it was a palette, you know, to prime, and it was about 6 feet tall, and all of my work, guys, was like A4/A3. That was my canvas. I would draw massive battle scenes on that kind of size, and I would draw it in pencil, and then I would ink it, and I would make it like violent and detailed and all kinds of shit like that. That was what I wanted to do, that kind of stuff. Just the small scale, but incredibly detailed. And the first thing they do, they give me this fucking board bigger than me, and I'm just, what do I do? I can't do this. This is just not within me. And everyone starts painting. Everyone's fucking painting, and they're all really good painters as well. Like, it was perfect for those guys, but I will never be a painter, dude. So I said to the guy, I was like, dude, I don't think this is for me, man. I thought this was going to be something else. And he was a bit standoffish, the dude. But he wasn't bad. He was just, it was almost like his class wasn't good enough or something, and it's like, I wasn't saying that. But he got a bit standoffish with me, and he kind of said, yeah, you're probably not in the right place. And I went over to another part of the building I'd never been in, because it was a big campus, sorry. And I went into a room, and it was the graphic design room, with a really young teacher who was a freelance graphic designer. And the room was full of Macs. It was just this circle of Macs with like a table in the middle for people to sit at and do some of the more physical stuff. And I've told this story before, so I apologise if you've heard it, but hopefully I've told it in a slightly different way. But when I went into that room, guys, because that other thing was just not going to be the goal, I was really scared, because I didn't know how to use those computers. I'd never used a Mac before, outside of like 1995, when the fucking mouse was square. So it was really, really intimidating, and everybody was on the computers. And they were all on Photoshop. And at that time, I'd never used Photoshop. I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it. And I didn't really know what to do, because this was my future, you know, these were my goals, these were the things that had been set for me, even though I didn't really fully understand them. And I did that course, and I passed. I got a merit, which is not quite the highest grade. Highest grade is distinction, but I got merits, which I was really proud of at the time, because I just wasn't good enough. There's no two words about it. You know, I liked my artwork, but I didn't tick the boxes. I wasn't very good at ticking the boxes. And at the time, I wasn't hitting my goals. I wasn't where I wanted to be. And I felt really cognizant of that fact. And it was scary. It was upsetting. But everything I learnt there, from the people that helped me and from the stuff I taught myself and the skills that I wielded and refined, I now use every day doing this. Every single one of those things that I didn't see a value in and I didn't understand why I was doing and it wasn't where I wanted to be, have gone on to enrich the job I've done now for a decade. Because it gave me the building blocks to approach this creative endeavour and to do it my own way without needing anyone else to do it for me. And you can't put a value on that. It's invaluable. And I didn't want to do it, and I wanted to quit, and it was really hard, and there was days when I was like beating myself up because I felt stupid, and I felt, why does everybody get this so easy, but I don't? But I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because now I can use that, and I can tell this story, and maybe you've had a similar story, or maybe you're in that story, and you're losing your way, and I can be the guy to say, it's worth sticking in. It sucks, it hurts, but it gets better. And who knows when you're going to use it, it might be the thing that opens the door to something that changes your life. I would not have had that experience, guys, if I had taken the easy path. And there were many easy paths. And this is why I have such a passion when it comes to not necessarily shitting on people's parade, even though it's very fun. I don't want people to validate quitting when I know they have it in them to push through the bad times and get to the good ones. And I make videos that try to help people with video games. Sometimes I do that well, sometimes not so much. And I get a lot of people that send me nice messages saying how much they've meant and how much they've helped and how much they've pushed them. And there comes a point where sometimes you need somebody to push you, you know? I know I do. I'm pretty good nowadays at pushing myself, but every so often you find yourself getting lazy, you find yourself getting complacent. Everybody needs a push sometimes. So if I can push somebody who's essentially convincing themselves that what they're doing is the best way to do something when it's not, and I can be that voice of conflict in your head going, maybe there's a better way, maybe you can do it in a different way, then I would love people to do that. Because that road leads to a better place than the lazy one does, than the easy one does, you know? I don't want the tests to become easier. I want us to become better, you know? I want games to get better. I don't want them to just be these things that play themselves and then they pat you on the back when you win. And everyone wins because you can't lose anymore. I don't want that. That was a new enemy, by the way. That's a mutant. He's very similar to an enemy from the original Quake, but he's, of course, slightly different, and he's very tanky. But we've also got the flying enemies coming back in. He's actually called a flyer, which I love, because it's exactly what he is and exactly what he looks like. But you can translate this tangent that these last two videos have kind of personified into anything and any endeavor that you do. Like, think about the keyboard. Learning the piano is such an interesting thing to do, because it's kind of the root of all music instruments. So if you learn the piano and you learn the keys and you learn the notes and the scales and everything, you can translate that on anything. You can do it on a guitar, you can do it on triangle, you can do it on a xylophone, you can do it on a drum kit, because they're all the same root notes, right? And think about what you're learning when you learn the piano. You're learning, not only are you learning dexterity with your hand, you're learning to do multiple intricate motions with your hand, but you're also learning hand independence because you're doing multiple intricate motions with two hands, sometimes two different rhythms. Incredibly complicated, incredibly hard. And there are grades of piano that you can learn and be tested on to say that you're at that competency. And then there's the pedals, depending on if you're playing on like different setups that change certain factors. And then look at the keys. You have all the white keys, you have all the black keys. There's so much going on with the piano. And you don't just get a free pass to play the piano. If you can do that, people go, damn, that's fucking cool. Because they know how hard it is. They know how difficult that instrument is to learn. And they know that they themselves could get access to it, but they don't. And they don't learn it because it's like anything else. I could run a marathon if I wanted to. How many times have you heard that? Have you noticed how you don't hear that from people that run marathons? Because they've done it, and it's really hard. I know I couldn't run a marathon. I don't like running. Fundamentally, it's not my bag. But the piano example, as random as it is really, really helpful to put kind of a final word on this topic before we move on. There are some people, guys, that take the incredibly difficult road of learning how to play a piano. Iteratively improving, grinding, the routines, the repetition, the scales, all of that. And they do something that is invaluable and amazing. And there are people that press that fucking button and it plays that pre-made rhythm and that pre-made tune, and you look like a dickhead in the music class, because everybody does that. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the pianist or do you want to be the dickhead? And who knows, maybe you want to be the dickhead, good for you. But to me, there's no contest here. The conversation was never about can you have fun with a certain control scheme. You can have fun eating your own shit if you're committed enough. The question was always, do you really want to stunt your development for this momentary satisfaction? Because there's something to be said about delayed satisfaction after learning something difficult and it finally gelling. But there you go, guys, that's the tangent. I couldn't help it. Hopefully there was something in there that was at least entertaining. Fighting games are amazing. They're worth your time. I can't imagine anybody wanting to take shortcuts because they simply don't exist. And the sooner that you're honest about it, the better. I suppose I should explain the ranking thing because I kind of went on another tangent, didn't I? And I didn't quite finish that thought. So earlier on, guys, I did say that somebody mentioned they wanted to get to a certain rank in Street Fighter 6 and then they'd be happy because they'd done the thing. And you'll meet a lot of people that want to do that. Sometimes it's for achievements, sometimes it's for the personal sense of satisfaction. And on a surface level, there's nothing wrong with it. On a surface level. And if you want to stay on a surface level, knock yourself out. I can't knock it. But here's what I want to plant in your mind if you're thinking about it this way. When you get to that rank, the thing you don't realise is that you didn't really do anything. There's a couple of Icaruses here, so be careful. It might just be one. Yeah, there's only one. And the reason I say this, guys, is not that it's not an achievement, because it is. But the thing that you notice when you do certain things in games is that you realise they don't mean as much as people seem to think they mean. And the meaning that they're given seems to get inflated. Be very careful here, guys. These lasers, when they touch you, they hit really hard. A great example of what I mean is platinums. There's this notion that when you get a platinum on a Souls game, that you master the Souls game and become the greatest player known to man, the Facebook champion of the world, the Ray Dimitri version 2.0. And I find this to be absolutely fucking hilarious. I do. Because I don't think doing arbitrary, nonsensical tick boxes in a Souls game does anything but teach you how to navigate a wiki or watch someone else's video who's done it before you and has made it into a nice and accessible experience. I really don't think getting a platinum on something means a fuck, unless it's a very, very difficult platinum. And I hate to be the guy to break it to you, but platinuming the Souls games is up there with making sure you didn't shit down your leg when you went to the toilet. It's just the truth, guys. Like, if you want to get an impressive platinum, play a fucking hard game. If you think Dark Souls is hard, you're in the wrong business. This is a boss, by the way. Big old tanky boy with a couple of berserkers. He's technically unique, and I don't know his name. He's not on my little enemy list here, but all you really do is use the cover to your advantage and splash the shit out of him. He has a lot of HP. I'm probably going to use my quad damage power up to put him down even quicker. I'm also going to put, is it the Hyper Blaster on, which is this gun. This gun uses the energy that the BFG uses. I like how it looks. I don't really like the gun much, but I put it on just for diversity's sake, because I want to use as much as I can, so it's not too boring to watch. And I say I'd managed to wrap this topic up, but sadly we don't have enough time here. Although this boss is going to take a little bit more. But the problem with putting a metric like a platinum on the sense of understanding in a game, it's like playtime. People often cite playtime as validation for why you should listen to them when it comes to a video game. But the sad thing about playtime is you can't differentiate between somebody that spent those hours doing meaningful things and learning about the game, between the player that just AFK'd while wanking off. And sadly, there's a lot of people wanking off.